It started showing up in Moscow parks, then in high schools, then on military bases. They called it Meow Meow, some weird street slang no one took seriously. But what it actually was meth 2.0. Cheap, homemade, impossible to trace. And it spread fast through telegram drop points, anonymous couriers, and word of mouth. Within months, thousands were hooked. Within a year, entire regions had collapsed into addiction. Hospitals couldn't keep up. Rehab didn't work. Soldiers were using it in the trenches. And the state? Busy fighting a war abroad. While the real war, the one inside its own borders, was being lost quietly. No headlines, no speeches, just bodies. This is the story of how a country distracted by conquest let a designer drug devour its future, and why no one in power is ready to stop it. The name sounds like a joke. Meow Meow, like something a kid made up, like something harmless. It's not. Mephedrone, officially called 4-methylmethcathinone, is a synthetic stimulant that hits like MDMA and cocaine combined. It floods the brain faster than most synthetic drugs, triggering euphoria, energy surges, sexual desire, and intense sociability. The rush feels incredible for about 20 minutes. Then it fades, and the only thing you want is another hit. That's the hook. Users don't take it to get high anymore. They take it to wake up, to function, to stay alive. The compulsion to redose is so strong that people binge for 2-3 days straight, without food or sleep, chasing a high that never quite comes back. On the come down, anxiety, depression, paranoia, hallucinations. Long term, insomnia, muscle spasms, memory loss, psychosis, organ damage. One young Russian addict described it like this: if you press a lit cigarette to your skin, it burns a hole. That's what mephedrone does to you. But here's the twist. The name Meow Meow didn't even come from Russia. It started on a British internet forum in 2009. Someone joked about calling the drug MCAT, short for its chemical class, a cathinone, and then someone said, why not call it Meow? A cat's meow. By November that year, UK tabloids like The Sun ran sensational stories about a new drug called Meow Meow, and the catchy name exploded globally. Russians never called it that. They called it meth or salt. But the Western media gave it a cute nickname, and now the world knows a generation-destroying drug by a name that sounds like a cartoon. Don't let the cute name fool you. This drug is burning through Russia's youth like wildfire. Olya was 15 when she first tried mephedrone. Her older boyfriend, who turned out to be a dealer, offered her a line one night in Moscow. It opened up a whole new world for me, she told BBC investigators years later. Within weeks, she was snorting meth several times a week, barely able to go a day without it. She dropped out of school, spent her days and nights chasing the drug. Very soon, she wasn't taking it to get high anymore, just to wake up and get out of bed, Olya admitted, to stay alive. When her boyfriend got arrested, her addiction only deepened. She found new ways to fund her habit, sinister ways, through Telegram. She discovered party meetups arranged by older men who would invite schoolgirls to snort together in exchange for free drugs. By 15, Olya was being pimped out to a 60-year-old client, trading sex for mephedrone or cash to buy more. He wanted a schoolgirl, she said. He'd either give me mephedrone or money, which I spent on mephedrone anyway. Then it got worse. Olya started recruiting her friends, literal middle schoolers, to come along so she could get a commission in drugs from the man. By 17, Olya was a skeleton. I looked like a skeleton. My nose was burned from the drugs. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep, she recalled. I didn't care about anything except the next dose. Her veins had collapsed from injecting. Nurses struggled to find a single vein to draw her blood during a health check. Her mother sent her to rehab, 7 months locked away, trying to get clean. But the pool was too strong. Within months of release, she relapsed. Mephedrone wipes out everything, Olya said. Your sense of worth, your self-esteem, your love for yourself, for your family, for your friends. It's a ruthless drug. In May 2025, Olya was sentenced to 6 years in a penal colony for attempting to sell drugs. But Olya's story isn't unique. It's emblematic of an entire generation of Russian kids being lost to this substance. And the numbers are staggering. Researchers from Darkmetrics, a group that monitors Russia's darknet marketplaces, found that about 1/3 of all illegal drug transactions in Russia now involve mephedrone. In 1 month of 2024, over 312,000 customer reviews on just 4 major darknet sites were for mephedrone purchases. Since most users only leave reviews after their second or third purchase, that suggests as many as 700,000 individual mephedrone deals in a single month on those platforms alone. On one random day in 2024, researchers counted 617 kilograms of mephedrone available for sale on Russia's 2 largest darknet markets, roughly 1/3 of all drugs on the darknet that day. These numbers translate to millions of doses flooding into communities every year. Any teenager with a smartphone and some cryptocurrency can order mephedrone for delivery in their city. No questions asked. The human toll is mounting fast. Over 18,000 Russian overdoses on illicit drugs in 2021 alone, with more than 10,000 dying, a 37% increase from 2020, and twice as many as in 2019. And those numbers have continued to climb. Mephedrone and other synthetic stimulants are driving this surge. Hospitals report spikes in overdoses, psychotic breaks, even fatal accidents tied to meth binges. Some rehab workers estimate that every 3rd drug user in Russia's under 20 population is hooked on mephedrone. A lost generation. That's what they're calling themselves. On her 17th birthday, during a brief sober period, Olya addressed her followers in a live stream. "Hi everyone, I'm completely sober today." She urged other teens to learn from her mistakes. Not long after, she was shooting up again. So how did it get this bad? Here's the thing about mephedrone. It's shockingly easy to make. Unlike heroin or cocaine, which rely on foreign-grown crops, mephedrone can be cooked up in any makeshift lab if you have the right chemicals. And those chemicals, the precursors, are flowing into Russia in a steady stream from China. Russian police are fighting a losing battle. Now any schoolchild can cook it, one Russian chemist said. The BBC obtained copies of DIY manuals circulating on the darknet, 150-page guides that lay out each step in layman's terms. Someone with only high school chemistry knowledge can follow along. The ingredients can be ordered legally from Chinese suppliers or bought in local hardware stores. The equipment? Minimal. Plastic jugs, household glassware, basic protective gear. Maxim was 16 when he became a mephedrone cook. He described it as like assembling a Lego set. Mix bottle number 1 with number 2, then pour into number 3. Mephedrone became popular with manufacturers because you can make it in the kitchen, Maxim explained. No sophisticated lab required. No chemistry degree needed. The economics are irresistible. A kilogram of mephedrone costs about 30 to 150,000 rubles to produce, roughly $300 to $1,500 in chemicals and materials. But that kilo sells for around 2 million rubles on the street, over $20,000, a markup of more than 10 times. Hundreds of small-scale labs have sprung up nationwide, from big cities to remote villages, operated by youthful amateurs looking to get rich quick. Police shut down more than 138 labs in 2024 alone. About half of all drug labs closed that year were making mephedrone. But for every lab they raid, new ones appear. The supply chain regenerates like a hydra. And distribution? That's where Russia's drug trade became truly unstoppable. Virtually all retail drug deals have shifted from street corners to online platforms. Encrypted messaging apps and darknet marketplaces host Amazon-like shops selling every intoxicant imaginable, complete with user ratings and customer service. Buyers pay in cryptocurrency and receive GPS coordinates for a hidden stash, called a clod, or dead drop, where the goods are concealed. Thousands of small drug packages lie hidden at any moment across Russia, taped under park benches, stuffed behind loose bricks and walls, hung in trees, buried underground, waiting for the purchaser to retrieve them. This contactless dead drop system means buyer and seller never meet in person, drastically reducing the risk of police stings. Everyone above the age of 14 in Russia knows about cladmen, a Russian term for stash man and dead drops, one drug lawyer says. There's even a clandestine handbook circulating called the Cladman's Bible, teaching couriers how to hide stashes and avoid leaving clues like footprints in the snow. The darknet market ecosystem has effectively made buying drugs as easy as ordering a pizza, with the anonymity of the internet wrapping everyone in a protective cloak. This has fueled a billion-dollar enterprise run by tech-savvy organized crime groups. These syndicates operate like startups. Slick branding, promotional videos, customer loyalty programs. In one outrageous PR stunt, traffickers in Moscow projected their darknet site's logo onto a high-rise building and sent a bus emblazoned with a QR code through the streets. They've turned mephedrone dealing into a 21st century e-commerce industry, profitable, efficient, and brutally violent under the surface. Couriers who lose packages or cross their bosses have been found beaten. Videos of these punishments get posted as warnings to others. But here's the critical advantage for the crime syndicates. Mephedrone is the ideal commodity. It can be mass-produced domestically with precursor chemicals imported from China. They aren't constrained by having to smuggle in plant-based drugs from abroad. Everything is produced here apart from cocaine, one Telegram-based dealer explained. Everything else is made by local chemists. Chinese chemical factories, some of the same ones that supply fentanyl precursors globally, have found eager Russian buyers. They advertise openly, selling raw materials for mephedrone. In 2023, a Chinese company even marketed special deals on mephedrone precursors for the Russian market after its executives were busted for selling fentanyl ingredients in the West. Traffickers purchased 3 chemicals labeled as ordinary products. For example, pesticides, according to Dan, an underage precursor smuggler interviewed by the BBC. They shipped them through existing trade routes, exploiting the loose customs borders of the Eurasian Union. Barrels of precursors get hidden among tons of legitimate Chinese goods. Electronics, clothes, even sex toys. Anything from sneakers to vibrators, Dan says. They often route through Kazakhstan to avoid direct China-Russian checkpoints. Once the shipments reach Moscow's gigantic wholesale markets, like the Yuzhny Vorota Southern Gates Depot, these chemical barrels vanish into the shadows. A single drum of clear liquid amid thousands of imports. In the constant influx of goods from China, a barrel of precursors can easily be hidden, investigators note. From there, the ingredients are parceled out to clandestine kitchen labs nationwide. It's a supply chain from hell, virtually impossible to fully interdict, continuously feeding the production of poison that reaches every Russian city. Even when cooks or couriers get caught, the machine keeps running. Take Maxim, the 17-year-old cook. After several successful batches and tens of thousands of rubles made, his luck ran out one July morning when police raided his apartment. He was arrested with 700 grams of product and a heap of chemicals. Sitting in jail awaiting trial, Maxim felt oddly relieved at first. It was a long-awaited rest, he wrote, no longer living in constant paranoia of a bust. But he soon faced a choice: spend more than a decade in jail or enlist to fight in Ukraine in exchange for a pardon. Maxim chose the war. In a letter to his mother, he explained bluntly that he would rather take his chances on the battlefield than rot in a cell until his 30s. He was sent to the front in mid-2023. He never returned. Officially listed as missing in action after his unit was wiped out in combat. Russian prisons are full of young Cladmen and amateur chemists like Maxim. Many are now being funneled to the front lines as cannon fodder. The drug trade is literally feeding Russia's war machine with its broken youth. But the devastation doesn't stop at prisons. It's seeped into the ranks of Russia's military. As Russia's war in Ukraine drags on, drug use among Russian soldiers has reportedly become widespread, especially the use of synthetic stimulants like mephedrone. Frontline troops, mired in a living hell of constant shelling and death, are turning to drugs as a desperate escape. One investigation found that the drug use is widespread in the Russian army, both on the front lines and in rear units, with perhaps 1 in 10 soldiers regularly using substances. Not just cannabis, but hard drugs including mephedrone, often referred to colloquially as salt by troops. Drug mules have been caught delivering mephedrone straight to the trenches in Ukraine. In one case, a courier was arrested smuggling 3 kilograms of mephedrone to frontline units. Why would soldiers risk using drugs in a war zone? Boredom and trauma. A Russian soldier interviewed by an independent outlet explained, They do drugs out of boredom. War is when you're constantly waiting for something, praying for it to end. When I was smoking mephedrone in the dugout, I didn't give a damn about anything. The boredom's a lot worse. The drug provides temporary oblivion, a way to mute the horrors of war. Under the influence, soldiers can momentarily forget the carnage around them. Others use it to cope with post-traumatic stress. After witnessing horrific violence, some troops go AWOL to find drugs and numb their minds. The war environment, paradoxically, makes drugs easier to obtain. In occupied cities like Donetsk and Mariupol, a quasi-normal city life persists behind the lines, with nightlife, cash to spend, and plenty of civilians or crooked volunteers willing to supply soldiers with narcotics. It's not difficult to buy drugs, said one volunteer in Donetsk. Commanders tend to turn a blind eye. The Russian darknet model has expanded into the war zone. Telegram channels specifically target Russian soldiers, offering dead drop deliveries in occupied areas. Within a month of the fall of Mariupol, dealers were recruiting local stashmen there. They even gave out free sample packages to get troops hooked. Some soldiers themselves have become petty dealers, bringing drugs from home or sourcing from locals to sell to their comrades. The consequences for the Russian military are dire. Intoxicated troops are less effective, more prone to accidents. There have been incidents of overdoses on base. One unit in Kherson had to medevac a man who collapsed shaking and sweating, a suspected mephedrone overdose that enraged his fellow soldiers who refused to serve with him thereafter. Military court records show a rising number of drug cases involving soldiers since mobilization began. In Krasnodar, the military court handed down one drug possession conviction in 2020, 3 each in 2021 and 2022. But in 2023, there were 3 such convictions in March alone. Some offenders have had their sentences quietly softened due to their combat service. For example, one soldier caught with 2 grams of mephedrone only received probation instead of the normal 3 to 10-year prison term. Such leniency hints at an unspoken acknowledgement by authorities that drug abuse in the ranks is becoming a systemic problem tied to the stresses of war. And as traumatized veterans trickle back into civilian life, experts warn of a coming wave of addiction. The annual death toll from illicit drugs has more than doubled since 2019, one analyst noted. A gruesome trend likely to continue as the stress of war eats away at society and traumatized soldiers return. The war abroad is feeding the drug epidemic at home, creating a vicious cycle of national self-destruction. So, what does all this add up to? The story of Meow Meow in Russia isn't just about a drug. It's about a society in steep decline. All the threads intertwine: a youth hopeless about the future, self-medicating into oblivion, a predatory criminal underworld flourishing in the shadows, a government focused on external wars while a public health catastrophe festers at home, a military increasingly filled with addicts and expendables. This is the portrait of a nation gnawing at its own foundations, a modern empire quietly poisoned from the inside. Consider the implications if an entire generation is lost to addiction or imprisonment. These teenagers and 20-somethings should be Russia's next engineers, teachers, leaders. Instead, countless are ending up in graveyards, rehab clinics, or jail cells. Many bright young minds, like Maxim, the DIY chemist, have channeled their talents into the drug trade or ruined their prospects with criminal records. In 2024, Russian authorities admitted that every third drug lab they shut down was making mephedrone. The problem is both ubiquitous and deeply entrenched. Social trust and stability are eroding. In some communities, ordinary citizens live in fear of the crime and disorder spawned by the local drug economy. Or they grieve children lost to overdoses. Families are being torn apart, parents losing their kids to this substance, or kids left orphaned when addict parents succumb. The moral fiber of society frays when bare walls, a stained mattress, and one syringe for 5 people, as Olya described her drug den, become a common scene in a nation's suburbs. Economically, a populace dulled by drugs or funneled into illicit enterprises cannot contribute to growth. Russia is already suffering brain drain and population decline. The drug epidemic accelerates both. It's siphoning off youth into a black hole. Public health systems are strained by rising HIV and hepatitis infections spread by needle sharing and by mental health crises stemming from stimulant psychosis. Russia now has one of the worst HIV epidemics outside Africa, thanks in part to injecting drug use. Culturally, the mephedrone wave signifies profound disillusionment. The apocalyptic tone in young users' blogs is palpable. They refer to themselves as a lost generation with no direction. "It was all a lie. I let my family down. I let everyone down," one addict wrote in despair. Many of these youths were born around the turn of the millennium. They've grown up entirely under Vladimir Putin's regime. Their resort to heavy drug use can be read as an indictment of a society that offers them no honest hope or purpose. Mephedrone provides an instant but illusory escape from a reality they view as bleak. Even some soldiers fighting in Russia, ostensibly a patriotic duty, are consuming drugs to escape the horrors and filth they've witnessed. The rot is everywhere, from the village schoolgirl trading her body for a dose, to the conscript getting high in a trench, to the businessmen and officials who themselves quietly indulge in or profit from this drug trade. This kind of widespread moral and physical decay is not sustainable. If current trends continue, the collapse of Russia's social order may accelerate. The war in Ukraine, costing tens of thousands of young lives and causing immense trauma, feeds the drug crisis, which in turn hollows out the human capital needed for any post-war recovery. Analysts have compared Russia's synthetic drug scourge to the American opioid epidemic. But there's a key difference. Russia's crisis is intertwined with an active war and a rigid authoritarian system, making its trajectory potentially even more explosive. Are we witnessing one of the forces that led to a nation's downfall? History has examples. Great empires weakened from within by public health disasters. The gin epidemics of Imperial Britain, the opium crisis of Qing China. For Russia, Meow Meow could be an Achilles heel, an endemic affliction eroding the vitality of the nation. In the end, the Meow Meow drug is destroying Russia in a very literal sense, destroying the bodies and minds of its youth, corroding the integrity of its institutions when even some police and soldiers succumb to or exploit the trade, shredding the bonds that hold communities together. Each addict lost to paranoia or overdose, each family extorted by a dealer, each young dealer jailed or killed. They're like individual bricks crumbling in the edifice of the state. The Kremlin may boast of military might or moral superiority over a decadent West, but within its own borders, a profound decadence is spreading. A generation high on fantasy while the nation's future slips away. The sight of schoolchildren scrounging for hidden drug stashes in playgrounds or streaming their injection sessions online feels like something out of a post-apocalyptic novel. Yet it's real in today's Russia. As one Russian narcotics officer lamented, "We stopped the big hashish supply. We stopped the big heroin supply. Something had to replace it, and mephedrone arrived." The war on drugs has become a war within, and Russia is losing. The very strictness of the regime's drug policy, harsh punishment, little emphasis on rehabilitation, may be backfiring, pushing the trade into more agile, covert forms, preventing addicts from seeking help due to fear of imprisonment. Unless something dramatic changes, this dystopian spiral will continue. Russia fought a war abroad while the real war, the one inside its own borders, was being lost quietly. No headlines, no speeches, just bodies. So, what do you think? Can a nation recover when an entire generation has been swallowed by addiction? Is this what the fall of an empire looks like from the inside? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to Fall of Nations for more analysis on the forces tearing nations apart from within.